Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Insurance for Nonprofit. We're going to be focusing on social services today. I'm Michelle Belden, an underwriter here at CID Insurance. I handle the nonprofits as well as other commercial lines. Laura Schock from USLI will be leading our presentation today. She is a nonprofit package team underwriter. She's very knowledgeable on this subject, so it's really great to have her with us. And then Jacob Cole is our marketing coordinator and will be here to handle anything in the background. So before we get started, we're just going to go over a few logistics about the webinar for those of you who haven't attended with us before. So everybody that is here will be muted, but if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we will answer them throughout the webinar. If for some reason we can't get to your question, don't worry, you can still drop it in that chat and we'll make sure to send you an email and get that question answered for you as well. And then at the end, there will be a short survey. If you guys could complete that, give us feedback on the webinar, if there's topics that you would like to see, anything like that, that really helps us to be able to better assist our brokers in this. So just a few things that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to do a little bit on what is the social service opportunity, go in depth of the different classes in there. There are hundreds of classes that fall within that category, so we won't be going into all of that because we'd be here for way too long. But just to give you guys some broad strokes, what changes we're seeing in the market, changes with carriers, changes with underwriting. So we'll go over a few of those things. Understanding what a social/human service risk is. Again, like I said, there's so many classes that fall within that you probably don't even realize something would fall in that class. I kind of say it's the catch-all for anything that's not a specific, like a house of worship or a chamber of commerce or things like that. We're going to go over the types of coverages that are important, especially for nonprofits. They are a little bit of a different beast than your normal P&C for like a retail merchant type business, but they're not as scary as they seem. So we'll go over types of coverages that would best assist them, to help try to prevent what they're needing coverage for. And then also find out some ways where you can maybe get your foot in the door with some of these nonprofits. There's plenty of places local to you that you could easily find a business opportunity. And then at the very end, we are going to do a demonstration on a quick way to get a phone quote with USLI. That is a service that we offer with them, and it is really great because you guys can get a quote within 5 minutes for a lot of different types of nonprofits and other lines of coverage as well. But since we're doing nonprofits, that's where we'll be focusing today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Laura to get us started, and she can take it from here.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Schock, as Michelle introduced. I'm an underwriter on the nonprofit team, and I'm very excited to be with you all here today talking about my favorite product, social and human services. And please use the chat. Michelle and Jacob are going to be helping me watch that, but any questions that come up, please feel free to chat it in. So let's talk a little bit about the opportunity. This is actually one of our fastest growing products. We saw the product grow over 20% last year, and I would estimate probably in the next 5 to 6 years, it probably will be one of our, if not our biggest product. These are the organizations, that are providing direct services in the community. So, as federal funding and state funding changes, as the economy cycles, these are the organizations, that are fulfilling those needs. So we've seen growth even throughout the pandemic, and we expect that growth to continue as well. So this slide just kind of highlights some, numbers if you're a data point person. A lot of the opportunity that we see here is around with, children and youth, homeless, housing obviously is a big topic these days, just with affordability, substance abuse, mental illness, and these are all classes, that we consider. Our social service product has over 200 product class codes in it, so it is definitely our broadest product, covering so many things. All right, and we've also seen a lot of changes in the marketplace with these, maybe they're a nonprofit that have been around for a while, but they've never had to provide proof of insurance before, and we're definitely starting to see that change. Maybe they were an organization using a library space or community space or a church space, and those, organizations are now requiring them to provide proof of coverage. One of the other things that we're seeing a lot of now, and this is driving not only the need for coverages, but what coverage limits are being requested, is things, like grants and contracts. They're getting more specific about what coverages and what limits they want to be seeing. And then one of the other things is we see sometimes like umbrella sort of organizations, and they used to be a roll up of, one master policy, and the different, chapters or different organizations would fall underneath them. Now we're seeing an unrolling of those, and each individual entity is needing to have its own coverage. And this is going for the GL, the errors and omissions, or your professional liability, your abuse, and also umbrella coverage now. All of these, we're just seeing a larger need for a variety of reasons. And then on the flip side of it, as there becomes more need, there's also changes in the marketplace. So I'm sure you're seeing carrier changes in terms of, what we're writing and what we're not, appetite changes. Some carriers are completely exiting the market, maybe on this class of business or maybe on certain coverages. Abuse and molestation for this product class is always going to be one of the biggest coverage lines, along with the professional liability, just solely based on what these organizations are doing. Some carriers are, reducing limits, maybe excluding coverage, especially for the abuse and molestation, more underwriting scrutiny around it. We want to see things like background checks, and that there's policies and procedures in place to supervise interactions with youth. All of that is becoming a bigger part of the conversation. Umbrella and excess is one of the other big things we've seen definitely within the last couple of years, with having contractual higher limits, whether it's for a grant. A lot of times we see it with school districts, even park districts, community centers that are requiring higher limits. So all of this, change is driving the need to remarket. People, need to have coverage, and especially with, rate increases, things like that, it is creating an opportunity. So let's talk about some good things, right? Like, so many challenges, but like what good things are out there? So USLI offers on our nonprofit package. The whole idea is to offer comprehensive coverage. So we're offering full package coverage that any of these, nonprofits would need. And we're focusing on the small to mid-sized nonprofits. You can get a quote over the phone, which we will demonstrate later. You're also welcome to email them in or web quotes. We like to, definitely promote the 3 ways to quote with us. We are admitted with direct bill in most states. And then once it's on direct bill, that auto renewal process just makes everything so streamlined and simple. Like, our whole thing, if you know us, is speed, accessibility, and ease of use. And so we want to make this whole process, easy and streamlined for you, because we all know time is very short these days. So let's dive into a little bit more about the actual social service product. We mentioned,
Laura, just before
yeah,
you go on, I just want to mention, yes, while USLI is helping us present this, and they are one of our main nonprofit markets, if there's for some reason a risk that doesn't qualify with them, we may have opportunities elsewhere. So while this does focus on USLI's guidelines and what they're writing, please note that we do have some other options as well. Just kind of depends on the risk. Just want to throw that out there for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you. We're not going to be all things to everyone, so we certainly know that. So thank you for pointing that out, Michelle. So the product class is, like I said, the scope of it is over 200 class codes. So we kind of break them down into maybe 4 kind of main classes, just to kind of wrap your head around it a little bit better. Community support organizations, these are, think about those, organizations that are in the community, directly giving out services. So like your food banks, your soup kitchens, maybe they're providing shower services, community centers, thrift stores. These, I think, are a lot of the nonprofits that we immediately, think of, because we see them everywhere in our community. We love these. We love all of them, but sometimes they're a little easier, like Michelle was mentioning earlier. Like, sometimes nonprofits can seem, or social services can seem a little bit scary because they seem like they're doing so many things. These are the ones that typically tend to be pretty straightforward, super easy to phone quote, super easy just because we know what they are. It's a food bank. Okay, we understand what that is. The next kind of class that we look at, or grouping, is residential. So this would be abused adult shelters. Think of safe houses, We see a lot of sober living homes. That's probably one of the biggest products that we see under it. And then homeless shelters. I do believe there was a question in advance of the webinar about homeless shelters. We do write them. I will say we're, again, on the smaller to mid-size accounts. So and this is going to go for any of our residential, up to 30 beds per location, and single sex or family only. So no co-ed and 24/7 supervision. Those are kind of some of like the big eligibility items. So homeless shelters tend to be more co-ed, say, versus like a sober living home. But if it is, a men's or women's only homeless shelter, it's definitely something that we can take a look at. Counseling is probably our second largest, kind of grouping behind youth. Youth is our largest, but this would be any sort of, and it can be, counseling, whether it's direct counseling, for, stress or, kind of your, grief, any sort of kind of, diagnosable, mental or physical disorders. And then it also would be like any sort of referral counseling as well. So think of these as, I'm someone who needs, help with paying my utility bill or something like that. What resources are out there for me? Maybe I'm on a lot of, medication and I need help affording my prescription, something like that. So either direct counseling or referral, kind of like a network, navigating a network of services. And then youth is our largest grouping. Like I said, we kind of do youth and senior together. So a lot of like after school programs, mentoring, community centers. More on the senior side, we can do caregivers if it's non-medical, going into individuals' homes. This is more from like a, maybe they're helping clean the house or, run errands or take them to appointments, something like that. The rating basis is going to depend on the class code, and so usually it's a couple pieces of information that we're going to need. Specifically say for like a, food bank or something like that, we're gonna do annual meals served versus like a food bank that's gonna be, square footage. So usually at the bottom there, kind of lists out some of the rating bases. It's gonna be a combination of that. And we're always going to want to know the number of individuals providing any sort of professional services. That is for the E&O. And then the number of volunteers as well. Oh, someone did ask a question. Fabulous. What about summer camps? Yes. So summer camps, as long as it is day camp, we are not a market for any sort of like overnight camps, but day camps, absolutely. We see this a lot with like a youth community center. So maybe, during the school year, they have after hours, after school, and then in the summer, since there is no school, they hold summer camps. So we absolutely can do them. We target, 50 kids or less on a day camp. We do have some flexibility with that. And then we're gonna rate it based on like the number of days and the numbers of campers per day. I will say that our camp class code, it will flip it not admitted. It is the one thing we're actually working now to try to get the camp code admitted. And if it's 2 weeks or less, we kind of consider that incidental. And if, so then we would just kind of, we wouldn't rate for it separately. But yes, summer camps, day camps, we can definitely consider them. So thank you for that question. Oh, and yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Laura.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, so for many of these classes that are on this page right now, you have to think of these in terms of if they're truly operating as a nonprofit or for-profit, because if it is for-profit, it's not going to qualify under USLI's nonprofit. So, adult shelters, halfway houses, sober living, those, can be either for-profit or not for-profit. So we're focusing on the nonprofit. CID does have options through my coworker, Lexi. She would handle anything that was for-profit that fell under that class. So that's something to take note of, like if you're working with a new insured, to get clarification on if they are truly operating as a nonprofit or if they are for profit.
That is such a great point. I would say 90% of the residential risks that I decline are because they're for profit. So just not an appetite fit. But yeah, thank you for saying that. All right, let's see. Okay, let's talk about some ineligible risks. Overnight camping, we just talked about that one. Adoption and foster care, any sort of like placement or screening, anything like that, We are going to be out on construction activities. If it's like Habitat for Humanity, sometimes we see the organizations where they go and help fix up people's homes, building wheelchair ramps, things like that. It's going to be outside of our appetite. Anything that's like super political or controversial, we can do like a limited premise only, but it's not going to have, you know, the comprehensive coverage that the normal package would. And then obviously any sort of, you know, adverse loss history. The other two I'll throw in there because we're seeing them more and more is like K through 12 schools. We won't do any sort of full-time schools. And then the other one is daycares. If it's, you know, children under 5, you know, we really want to be that 5 and up in terms of youth. All that said, the D&O and the EPLI might be eligible. So we can still, you know, potentially take a look at that. All right, so this is kind of an overview of the package when I was talking about, you know, comprehensive coverage, you know, being all available in one package. So obviously your general liability, we talked about the importance of the professional liability. So this is the errors and omissions. So this is, you know, coverage for those professional services rendered or any sort of error or omission when those services are being rendered. The contingent medical malpractice, this is in our coverage form where there is a carve back for this for the organization itself. It would not be for the individual, but say there's a physician and he's coming to do health screenings at a community center. There would be a carve back of coverage for the organization as long as certain conditions are met. Like the physician can't be an employee or volunteer. There has to be like a contract. They have to carry their own, you know, insurance, but there would be coverage under that for the organization. So that's a pretty big piece of it as well. Blanket special events. A lot of times these organizations are having, you know, maybe fundraisers or, you know, just kind of celebratory sort of events. We cover eligible events up to 1,000 attendees. So again, we're focusing on the smaller to mid-size. So usually that's covering a majority of their events. Abuse and molestation, again, is, you know, huge for these organizations. The way our coverages work on this is for the general liability, the abuse, and the professional liability, the E&O, we offer up to 1 million, 3 million on the underlying, and those are separate limits for each of those. So 1 million general liability, 1 million abuse, and 1 million professional liability. We do offer excess umbrella up to 5 million. I will say, I know we have a lot of California individuals on the phone. We do not offer excess abuse in California. Some states we can for youth up to 1 million, other organizations, non-youth up to 2 million. And then kind of rounding out general liability, we do look at higher non-known auto, including that, and that can include the like transport or transport of individuals. So say they're taking, you know, people to their appointments or something like that. We can consider that. There was a question that came in. Okay, can you write a nonprofit that specializes in sexually abused children? It's possible. I need to know a little bit more. So if they're involved with, say, like getting a child out of a family where there is potential abuse, if they're getting involved in any sort of the criminal or legal actions of that, probably not. But if they were more of like an education organization, recognizing, you know, signs of sexual abuse, maybe from, you know, individuals that were working with children, something like that, we could. So it would depend on what the organization is actually doing. But thank you for the question. Jumping back to the package, property, nonprofit directors and officers, and employment and practices liability. This is a big one that I feel like a lot of smaller nonprofits don't necessarily think about a lot of the time, is protecting the, you know, the board of directors. And I will say our employment practice liability includes volunteers as well as third-party harassment and third-party discrimination. I wish I could change the name on it because so many times we hear, oh, we don't have employees, but it is still incredibly important coverage to have. We can also offer crimes, so this would be like your employee dishonesty, and then excess and umbrella, which I kind of covered. And then one other thing, just talking about the D&O coverage, is the Our coverage form is going to have a lifetime occurrence reporting period. It's going to be full prior acts and defense costs outside the limit. So from a comparative standpoint, we really think our coverage form on the D&O is quite strong. All right, so claims examples. So from a professional liability standpoint, again, this is the E&O, your errors and omissions. I know sometimes we like to just throw verbiage around versus D&O, the directors and officers. So if, a nurse is, rendering services and there was, some sort of negative reaction, that is them acting in their, professional standpoint, this would fall under the E&O coverage. And again, going back to that, medical malpractice carve out back on the organization, they would have coverage assuming those certain conditions are met. Abuse and molestation is obviously a very big one. Anytime we are having, interactions with children, especially if it's one-on-one, this one here on the slide was an overnight camping trip. Anytime overnight, the hazard risk increases, and so the need for coverage for that, whether there is overnight or not, even if it's not one-on-one, is still there for a need of it. I will say if it's a youth organization, we require that our abuse and molestation eligibility items be met for our GL as well as the abuse. So if it's a youth-focused organization and they don't have, proper procedures and processes, background checks like that, in place, we won't even offer the GL because it's so important. And then this last one here on the slide is going back to the directors and officers. So a lot of times we'll see like mishandling of mismanagement of funds. So like in this case, if a donor made a contribution, it was supposed to go to a certain, certain item, or it was restricted in some way, and they ended up using, the money, in this case was a new car. But we've seen it just even maybe for other, actual operations of the organization, but not as directed, that can bring about a suit as well. So these just kind of give you an idea of like the range of examples and where they fall under the coverage lines. So other good news, minimum premiums. They start as low as $500 in California, $735 in other states, property as low as $250, and then directors and officers and employment practices as low as $565. So we like to point that out because we think those are pretty competitive. And then quick overview here of just some of the recent successes that we had. Homeschool co-ops is one we've been seeing a lot of. These are the groups that maybe meet, one time a week, have, the kids and parents together, kind of give them a network of support. So you just can kind of take a look at some of these that, run the variety that we have. Youth Community Center is a very big one for us. Vocational workshop, I did not really touch on, but this would be any sort of, kind of training for individuals, maybe with a physical or mental disability, anything from life skills training, as well as, maybe work skills training as well. All right, I know everyone also wants to know about new business, like where can I find new opportunities? And Cause IQ, if you're not familiar with it, I would highly recommend you go out. It's just causeIQ.com. It's, in open format. You can find and search basically all nonprofits. And the way you can query it on Cause IQ is so nice and user-friendly. You can do it by size of the organization, by location of the organization. You can pull up their 990s. It gives a nice little overview of the risk in kind of 2 or 3 sentences. I use this, this is open on my web browser every single day. I love using it, especially when you get an app that says, this is a social service organization that helps, individuals. And you're like, what do they actually do? This is a great resource. And especially you can drill down then into potentially other opportunities. So like a really interesting thing to do is say you find like a booster club for a school and it's the band booster club. A lot of times there's going to be a football booster club and a volleyball booster club and a basketball booster club, and it can lead to many more opportunities. So if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend that you do. All right, so other opportunities that we see being very successful is a cross-sell of special events. So say you get a special event. I actually just had one this morning from a foundation. They're going to host a 5K. So I quoted the special event. I think it was like $280. And then I also quoted an annual package on it as well. So like it's going to cover all of their blanket special events, as well as, maybe they have planning meetings, maybe they have, other events, and it's going to give them, instead of just that one day of coverage, it's going to give them an annual package for most times not that much more. D&O and EPL is another great cross-sell. A lot of organizations are focused on the GL just because, like what we were talking about with contracts, things like that, and they're not necessarily thinking about, protecting the board, third-party discrimination and harassment. I will say that we have more EPL claims than D&O claims. So that line of coverage, I think, is being recognized more consistently now as the need for it, but a lot of these smaller nonprofits maybe are not, attuned to it yet. Instant phone quotes, again, these are social services are not meant to be scary, but if you have one, I would recommend highly calling it in. You can talk with an underwriter, kind of talk through things, make sure you're classing it right, make sure we're rating for it correctly, all of that. So highly recommend. And challenge, what we think too, like we want to write more of this business. We are trying to expand our appetite. We like this product. And so, if we're not understanding something or you think it is a, less risky hazard than maybe we're making out to be, please have that conversation with us. And then also requoting business. We love doing this as well. So maybe something we took a look at last year, didn't end up winning it. We are happy to take a look at it again this year and put those terms out there and see if there is an opportunity, just because there is so much change in the market. All right, how to get a quote. You can always send an application. Phone and web are also an option, and we're actually going to do a phone quote demo right now. So we're going to dial up our, we're going to dial up our instant phone quote team.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Hillary. How you doing?
I am doing great. How are you today?
Good, thank you. I'm here with CID, and we would love to do a phone quote, please.
Awesome. So what kind of account do you have?
All right, so this organization, they distribute food, like boxed, food, but then they also do some like clothing, coats, shoes, essentials distribution, shampoo, sort of those things. Is that something we can do?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Awesome. And what's the name of the organization?
It's called Sunshine Food Bank.
Okay. And what lines of coverage were you looking for?
We are just looking for, so they're just leasing some space from a church. So we are just looking for general liability, but then they also have a board of directors. So I'd love to get the management liability, the D&O and EPL as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And what state are they based out of?
This is in California.
Okay. Can you provide their location address, please?
It is 88 Main Street, and that is in San Diego, 92115.
Okay. And what is the square footage of space occupied by the food bank?
Yep, they're using about 1,000 square feet.
Okay, and then what about the annual estimated donations from the clothing and essential items that they're providing?
So they distribute about $20,000 worth of goods a year.
Okay. And then how many professionals are there or volunteers involved in the organization?
Yeah, they don't have any employees. They just have about 15 volunteers.
All right. And then last question, what are their annual revenues?
About $50,000.
Thank you so much. And let's work on saving this up for you.
Perfect.
Yeah, if you just reach out to them and just explain it, like, hey, it was me.
All right. I'm just saving it up right now.
All right.
And we will also provide you with an excess or umbrella quote as well in case they need limits greater than 1 million, 2 million. We can also provide 1 million, 3 million if you are interested on the GL side. And this is for D&O limits of $1 million. Are those limits all okay with you?
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right, so the quote that I have here for you is admitted with USLI, AM Best rated A++. It is eligible for direct bill up to 4 payment installments. The total premium for the general liability and the management liability comes to $1,813. This also includes professional errors and omissions limits of 1 million, 2 million, abuse limits of 1 million, 2 million, and the directors and officers, as well as employment practices, in addition to the GL. We also add the blanket additional insured on for you there too. So I can go ahead and send it over to you now.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Hillary.
Thank you.
All right, so that just demonstrates the ease. I know Michelle referenced 5 minutes or less getting a quote, so hopefully that was a little bit quicker, but those, you know, kind of easy to define, smaller to mid-size nonprofits, quick and easy to get a phone quote with us. So please send us the applications, challenge, you know, what you think we can do, and please don't hesitate to call in and get a quote with us. And thank you for your time.
I just want to add with the instant quotes, we definitely do recommend the phone quote over the web quote because sometimes, you know, especially on nonprofits, some people aren't always sure how to classify things. So like you said, you know, it's easy for Laura to kind of give a vague description-ish, and the underwriter, Hillary, was able to determine what type of risk it was and how to classify it. So sometimes on the web quotes, we see that people struggle. But if you want to use the web quote, you can still submit through and it will get referred to a USLI underwriter, and then a quote will come through. And then true on a phone quote as well, if there's for some reason it's not phone quotable, the underwriter you're speaking to will send you a copy of the application that's required, and then you'll just send that application over to me and I would submit the paper submission over to USLI for terms if they're able to consider that way. So just because it's not phone quotable doesn't mean it's ineligible totally with USLI. It just might not be something that's easily to be able to quote over the phone. All right, so that is our presentation today. I really appreciate everybody joining us. Again, if you have any more questions or anything like that, feel free to drop those in the chat and we can get those answered for you. Again, there will be a survey. You can send your submissions to our submissions email at cidinsurance.com. That email is for any type of submission you have. Feel free to send it there. My contact information is there as well. So we thank you guys for joining us today, and this will be posted online as well. So if you missed out or you had to leave early or whatnot, feel free to find it on our website and, you know, forward around your office as well. So thank you everybody for attending, and thank you Laura and Hillary for joining us.